Well, hello there, folks. It's been a while. I'm sitting out here in the sun in a nature reserve, looking out over the ocean and some birds, and I'm sitting up on a pretty high cliff, and I can't really tell, but I think there's an elderly couple skinny dipping a couple hundred meters in front of me. So I'm gonna try not to look that way as much as I can. But yes, it's been a while since we did one of these, or since I did one of these. A lot has happened, and a lot has changed. Both with the world as a whole, and with me. I watched that last video I posted about, taking a break or whatever I was saying. Our second romantic date, I called it. I guess this is our third. Don't get any funny ideas. But yes, a lot has changed. I watched that video, like I said, and was talking about therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, finding out I got ADD and all this stuff, and trying to sort of find a direction or get some control back in my life and all that stuff. And it's tough. I wish I could say that I did all those things, but I don't think I could. But I also don't think I should say that I haven't. I guess it's a journey. It takes some time. I don't know. I don't think I'm alone in feeling kind of lost in the modern world, and kind of like it's very challenging, to put it mildly, to find some reason and some purpose with this fucking crazy and weird and impossible to grasp experience of being alive and sentient. I'm having thoughts about how that would work that I haven't had before, so I guess you could say I'm making some progress. I don't want to sound like I'm just coming on here to trauma dump. It's only our third date after all. But I remember at the time of, back when I was more active with this, and just this frame of mind I was in, and stuff like that, and how different it is now. I've always struggled with my mental health for about as long as I can remember, really. I had a pretty rough childhood and adolescence and stuff that took its toll, and it sort of ingrains certain bad habits and behaviors and thought processes and stuff that you struggle to get rid of. I guess that's one thing therapy helped me with, is at least mapping out what those things are, whereas before you kind of just you take your reality for granted. You do things every day that you don't really realize until you really think about it, that they're maybe not good things to be doing. And therapy helped me a lot with figuring stuff like that out. But then it's after that, and I think this is a pretty universal male experience, because from my understanding is they're pretty satisfied with just talking about the problems. I kind of want to fix them. And that's harder. It helps with therapy, like I said, and mapping out the issues, and sort of really completing the equation. If you think of yourself as what is after the equal mark, and just everything else before was kind of confusing and unclear. I think therapy helps you kind of get all the pieces of the equation in there to understand why you are the way that you are, and that helps. It helped me with not being too sort of hard on myself, and it's one thing to sort of be strict with yourself, and it's another thing to just kind of fall into self-loathing when you're not always doing the right thing, which I think is probably the case for most people a lot of the time. So there's no point in sort of bashing yourself. But yeah, like I said, a lot of things have changed. I remember I was in a phase of I was dipping one too many toes into the pool of promiscuity, you could say. Looking back at it, it wasn't worth it. I don't know. If you're somebody who's thinking along those lines, which I think is very natural for a man, you know, I think without some like a certain level of self-awareness and self-regulation, it's very easy to fall into like I don't know what's a good way of putting it, but the crass way would be to just become like a chronic pussy hunter, which is kind of what I, in my own way, was. And it didn't make me feel better. It was never nice, you know what I mean? I never left one of those encounters feeling better about myself or my life. You kind of end up just using other people as a like breathing fleshlight, and it's not a good way. It's not a good way to relate to other people, and it's not a good way to treat yourself. Ultimately, because it's kind of like the opposite of like a self-respecting behavior. Because you kind of treat yourself as like a throwaway human being, like when it comes to other people. So that wasn't good. That's something I'm not really into now. I'm pretty celibate these days, voluntarily, I think, for the most part. And I'm just kind of, I don't know, just, if it's not serious, I don't think I care anymore. Because, I mean, there's only so many times you can, like, sleep with a random person before it's like, well, you know, you've seen it now. It's not like it's completely mind-blowing every time. No, it's not. It's kind of same-ish and sort of unfulfilling and awkward and just, yeah. So that's one thing that I've, I guess, outgrown. I think I've kind of lived with a version of a crisis of faith, I think, since probably like my adolescence. I think there's like a point in your teenage years where you kind of awaken to what the greater world is like and has been, and I don't know if I'm sure it's like that for others too, but I know for me it was like a rough point in my life where I was like, oh, the world is like a fucked, dark place. I mean, there's great, beautiful, and positive and lovely parts of life too. Obviously, I like this view that I'm looking at right now that you can't see because I'd have to pick up the camera and mess up my whole setup here. But I can tell you it's pretty, and it makes me feel calm and at ease. So there's a lot of beauty in the world, obviously, as well. But, you know, humans and our negativity bias, you know, when your brain's not fully developed and you're like 16, 17, which is around the time where I was kind of coming alive or waking up to a lot of the sort of worldly things that go on. You know, it's rough. It's a lot to process. Because it's not like they teach you that shit in school, you know what I mean? It's not like they tell you that, like, both of the parties in the U.S. political system are bought by the same big money, and they don't give two shits about anything that goes on with normal people. As an example, not to dunk on the U.S. especially, it's pretty much the same thing in all the Western world, and probably the rest of it too. But, you know. So, yes, I just really veered off here. Crisis of faith, that's what I was having. You know, I had my phase in my teenage years where I was like edgy atheist, you know, like there's no God and all this, you know, all these same tired arguments. I'm sure everyone has heard, you know, ad nauseum throughout their lives. And now I find myself kind of not thinking that at all. Like, I'm pretty convinced there's something akin to a God, you know. I'm not saying it's like a Christian evangelical, you know, Gandalf looking old man, but, you know, there's a lot of things that we can't see with our eyes or hear with our ears that goes on in reality that sort of defy conventional understanding. I guess we could talk about that. Recently, I had a psilocybin ceremony. What is it now? Like 2 months ago, about. And boy, was that something. It's really hard to explain what that's like. I mean, I'm sure there are YouTube videos and stuff you can look up, but I mean, I'm convinced that there's nothing that'll actually convey what it's like other than having your own experience with it. But I guess I'll tell the story. I'll give it my best shot. It took me a while to just even be able to put it into words, and it was like every time I would open my mouth, it was like just a stutter, freeze, where I just like there wasn't any words in the English language that could describe what I saw and felt and experienced. But basically, I got in touch with like I guess like a sort of new agey medicine woman type through some mutuals, and I had a psilocybin ceremony. So I went there, and she made it into like a cacao drink, almost like a hot chocolate, with the psilocybin inside. And I think it was like 3.2 grams or something like this. This was my first time doing psilocybin. And then she'd prepped, like, it was at her apartment, so she'd like made all kinds of preparations, and she'd set up like her whole living room as like the spot for the ceremony. So there was like all kinds of incense and candles and like mantra music and stuff playing. And she'd set up like a mattress on the floor where she laid down after drinking it, and then she like put this like blindfold thing over my eyes, and I lay there on my back for like, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or something. And then I started feeling something. I had my eyes closed, obviously. And I remember the first thing I was feeling is like my right leg was just like twitching a little bit. Like every couple seconds it would like twitch a little bit. And then, a couple minutes pass and then, like it twitches more aggressively. And then it like, my whole leg is like spazzing. And then it moves over my other leg. And then, up my body. And then, after a couple minutes, time gets a little hazy when you're under that kind of influence. But I think after a couple of minutes, like my whole body was just like spazzing. I was having like full body tremors. And somewhere in the middle of these full body tremors is where I just disappeared out of myself. And this is where it gets hard to convey exactly what happened. But I was just like flailing. It was almost like an epileptic, I imagine an epileptic episode is like. And I was making noises like grunts, and then I got louder, and then I was just screaming. And she was there, she was like soothing me, and I think she was singing and stuff. And so eventually that passed, I think, for a bit, and then it sort of came in waves. And my recollection of it here is really hazy, but I remember seeing a lot of weird stuff. Like, I had my eyes closed, obviously, and blindfolded, but, in my mind's eye, I guess you could say. It was really like I wasn't even me. I don't know that this was like a full-on ego death experience necessarily, but like there wasn't any time or ego or sense of self in whatever layer of reality I found myself at that point. But I remember it was like, the way I've been trying to describe it so far is like, if you've ever gone down like a water slide, like a water park or something, like one of the closed ones, it's like a tube, and you get into like a spot somewhere where like it's darker. It felt like that, but it was like a dark purplish. Like if you've ever looked at like Warhammer 40k imagery of what the warp looks like. It was a little bit like that, but not sort of viscerally scary in that way, but it was like the same kinds of colors. And I remember being in something that felt like a tunnel, and I was just being thrashed around, like violently thrown around in this tunnel. And you know, there was obviously, like, throughout this whole thing, there were things that I felt like I saw and heard and felt with my conventional senses, and then there was a lot of things that came at you, and like impressions and thoughts and feelings that didn't necessarily feel like your own. And that was happening at this point. And I remember the feeling I had when I was being thrashed and thrown around in this tunnel-like place. It was a feeling of like being completely alone and lots of like abandonment stuff. That I remember. And I remember at this point I was like screaming, like me, like in the room, I was screaming, and I was tossing and turning a lot again, and she was like holding me and trying to like soothe me and all this. And that, like, the tremors would come and go in like waves, and there was like a fixation in my jaw, or like a point of concentration for like all the tension or whatever, where I was like clenching my jaw crazily. And she would like put her hands on my, like, on both sides of my jaw, and then she said something that I don't exactly remember. It was something in the realm of, it's okay, you can let that go now, or something to that effect. And I just started like crying hysterically. And butterfly drive by. And then this is where it got hazy again. I don't exactly remember. There's like a point where it's just kind of blank. But the next thing I remember was suddenly feeling like freezing cold. And I still had the blindfold on, and I saw like a world that was just ice and snow and dark. And everything was dead and just frozen through, like, and you know, I hate winter, like, with a passion. If winter was a person, I'd do unspeakable things to it. I hate it. Like, I can't stand the cold, and I can't stand the dark. It's not good for my already, you know, shaky mental state. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I was seeing, like, it was like a realm that was all ice and cold, and it just felt like death. So she wrapped me up in like blankets and stuff. I remember that. And then it gets hazy again. I'm kind of in and out of it here, and then, and I don't know how much time passes between all this, because like time ceases to be a thing, really, throughout this whole experience until I come back from it, pretty much. And I remember, seeing all kinds of weird stuff. There was like a point where I calmed down after this whole ice world vision. And then after I was calm for a bit, I remember I was starting to get, like, I don't know, hysterical or whatever. Again, I started screaming and stuff. And I remember at this point she, like, took off my blindfold, like, slowly, and sort of, like, eased me into looking with my eyes, which I hadn't done yet at that point. And I've been out of it probably for, like, an hour or two. And when I looked around the room, like, this is where it really gets tough to describe what you're looking at. I've seen some, like, simulations on, like, YouTube and stuff that kind of convey the visual aspect of it, but like I said, there's like a layer of impression and feeling to everything that you're seeing, which is the real compelling part beyond the visuals, and that's the part that's really hard to put into words. But yeah, I was looking around the room, and it was like everything was vibrating, and everything, those infinite, like, fractal zooms, everything was doing that. Like, everything was, like, if I was looking at, like, I think she had like a sound bar, on like one of those TV bench things. I was looking at that, and I remember just like from the corners and edges of it, like these like infinite sort of zoom type effects were happening like everywhere I looked. Every single thing that I looked at was doing that to some extent, and while also it felt like it was vibrating. And then she took out a drum. It was just like a flat drum with like a handle thing here. It wasn't like an elongated thing. So she was holding it like this, or like this, I guess, and then she was drumming it like that. And when she did that, I could see the sound. Like when she banged it and it vibrated and it creates the sound, I could see it with my eyes, which is tough, I think, to imagine if you haven't seen something like that. But it was kind of like, imagine if you put like a transparent glass of water on like a really bassy speaker, and you played something and you could just see it vibrate. It was kind of like that. Kind of. I mean, that's the best example I can give. It's probably not a perfect example, but it's about as good as I can, as good an example as I can come up with. And yeah, that did something to me too, I remember, because she held it over me, and she was doing it like above my chest, I think. And then I remember it was like something inside me got really like agitated about that, and I started freaking out again, or like just screaming, and like something was like coming out of me. It almost felt like it's like a weird little exorcism. And then I remember I was starting to calm down, because I think like it was almost like I'd gotten all of it out of me, whatever the stuff was. And I was beginning to calm down, and I remember she was singing to me. She was singing like these mantra type, like meditation type music. And I remember looking around and just sort of like being just at a loss for words for what I was seeing. Like, it was wild to see that stuff. And then I remember I looked at her, and she's like, she's maybe in her, what is she? She's maybe 10 years older than me. She's like early 40s, I think. And I remember looking at her, and she started saying stuff. She started talking to me, because like she knows me a little bit, and like she's familiar with sort of my the problems that I've had in my life and stuff, and the reasons for me wanting to do that in the first place. So she started talking to me about some of that stuff, and like I don't remember what she said, but I think she was like giving me advice on it. But I remember the feeling I got when she was doing that. It was like I was watching the whole scene on a screen in front of me, like I wasn't actually there, and it felt like it was just an impression I got. There was nothing, I guess, about what I was looking at that told me this, but this was just like a present or pressing and urgent thought that like this was like a meta way for the universe to tell me something, and that it wasn't that the stuff she was saying were things I needed to hear, but that the scenario itself was in some way the message. I'm still trying to work out what that means, but that was like clearly the impression that was given to me, I guess. And then what was happening? Like I said, it's real hazy, a lot of it. Yeah, she was talking to me some more, and I was looking at her, and she's got she's got really big, bright blue eyes. And I remember looking at her, and I was thinking that, like, she's got really big eyes. And as I thought that, her eyes got bigger when I looked at her. Like, they just, clearly, visibly grew to, like I said, they visually grew to, like, cartoonish proportions. And I was looking at that, and I was like, oh shit, my thoughts affect reality. And so I just began thinking stuff, and it would start happening in front of me. Like I was thinking, Like, what if, just little things, like, what if she leaned her head this way, and then she would? And then, this is where it really becomes difficult to explain, but it was like an infinite fractal zoom of ideas. So it was like, when I thought something, there was like an infinite amount of branching things that could happen from there that would like feel like a infinite fractal zoom of potentials. I don't know, I think that's maybe the best way I can describe it, because I don't think there's a good way to describe it with words. But it was just this feeling of like, just how much is possible, maybe, is a good way of putting it. So I was thinking that a lot. And then she started talking about, first I was looking at her. And then she was still like giving me advice about stuff, and there was some impression in my head that what she was saying was wise, or something like this. And then I would see her age. Like I said, she's like early 40s. And she's like she looks pretty young. She's like a little bit baby-faced. And I would look at her, and then she would age, like visibly. She would age to like really, really old. Like not even just like old lady old, but like primordial, super ancient old. She looked, you know, inhumanly old. And then she would revert. It would go in like a cycle, and she would go back to looking really, really young. And I didn't know her when she was really young, but like I saw what she looked like. And it would just like cycle like this at like a hyper speed. Like if somebody, you know, 1000x'd your aging speed, and it just went in a loop. And that was going on for a bit. And then she started talking about something like relating to my situation in my youth that was like similar to hers or something. And then I would see her physically change to the age she was in the situation she was talking about. And like I said, I didn't know what she looked like when she was young. Like I haven't seen pictures of her young or whatever. But that happened, and I saw that on her, like clearly. Like it, you know, it didn't feel ambiguous. Like I could really see it in her face. Yeah. And then it gets a little hazy here again. I don't remember much. I remember trying to get up and go take a piss, and barely being able to walk. I remember that. She told me not to look in any mirrors. I still don't know why. I forgot to ask. And then I was kind of out of it for a bit, I think. And then we ate. She'd made some food, like ritualistically or whatever. And we ate it. And after that I started feeling like a little bit more like myself. Like I could talk and articulate myself in, because I couldn't before when she was talking to me. And then she tried to like ask me about what I'd seen, but I was like still out of it. And I think I told her that. And I would just like look at my hands and stuff, and I would still see all these like fractal type things and vibrations and stuff. Then that went on for a bit. And then it's kind of fuzzy again. I don't remember much, but we went out eventually. Like after I was like mostly back, because we'd been in her apartment this whole time, and I was out of it I think for like a total of maybe 4.5 hours or something. We went out on her balcony. She lives in like this normal, you know, apartment residential area, and there was this little sort of park space like right below the balcony. And we stood out there, and I just like looked at like the grass and trees and stuff, and like everything looked alive, and all the colors were like felt saturated. Like your experience of them they looked the same, I guess, but like your experience of them was saturated in a way that like you never feel otherwise. And I was still pretty shaken from the whole thing, but I also felt like this extreme sense of like calm. and it's not a typical feeling for me. Like I don't achieve like a Zen type state of mind easily, if ever. Since then, it's been a lot easier. But on that balcony there, right after I was coming down from this, I felt like serene in a way that I find it very hard to explain. And then, I spent the a couple weeks after that just trying to unpack what everything meant, because it was kind of impossible to interpret a lot of it in the moment because it was just so overwhelming as an experience. It's pretty crazy. But like, there's a lot of stuff I could say, but it would be a lot of word salad, I think. But the best way I think I've found to summarize it is kind of like, everything is the way that it should be, and everything will be what it'll be, and that's okay. That's kind of like the ultimate takeaway I think I got from the whole thing. Because I'm a very, like, brooding person. I think about stuff a lot, and surely overthink sometimes. And that sort of put a almost complete stop to that, for like at least a week after that, which is not normal for me. So that did a lot. Yeah. So that's pretty crazy. That was a long tangent. I think my camera even reset. I have to start recording again. But yeah. It's been a busy while. There's a lot of other things going on. As far as the gaming world goes, it's pretty dead and tired, most of it. Played a lot of Helldivers. It's a pretty good game. What else? Oh, right. Space Marine 2. Fuck yeah. That's coming out pretty soon. I posted about it on the Discord server and on that like community tab thing. And I'm going to do a playthrough of that when that comes out. And I've pre-ordered it. Because, of course, I did. I don't think I've ever talked about it, but I'm a pretty big 40k fan. So I get access to it on September 5th. So I'm going to be doing a playthrough from then, basically. So that's going to be neat. But yeah, there's a little update for you. This is, I guess, Coke and a Smoke episode 2. There's no Coke, I didn't bring one, and I don't smoke anymore. So, tough break. This is just a little cosmic ramble. But anyways, I hope you guys are doing good. I'm giving this channel like a second crack here. I'm gonna see if I can bring this to life and maybe do something that's more interesting and more thought-provoking and evocative than, unscripted and unengaging Bannerlord battles. As much as they did give me 25,000 subscribers with very little effort, I do appreciate that. Just on a personal level, they're not the most fun for me because I don't care anymore about that. But yes, I hope you guys are doing good, and I'm sorry if this is rambly and incoherent, but there you go. Till next time.